Hi, welcome again to Seekers and Cynics. This is Bodmin Road Church. My name is Richard Bentley. This week on Seekers and Cynics, I want to try and answer the question, what do Christians mean by the word salvation? What is salvation? Sounds like a terribly old-fashioned word, doesn't it, in some senses? We perhaps reminds us of the Salvation Army. Of course, that was founded in the 1800s. Salvation, what is that? Just because a word might sound old-fashioned doesn't mean that it's not important or that it's meaningless. We need to just think a little bit more carefully about it. The word salvation and the concept of being saved is at the very core of New Testament teaching in the words of Jesus and in the letters of the apostles. And so if we're going to understand Christianity, we need to understand what this concept is all about. The first thing to say, just going to say a few things, is that the church, in all its different shapes and sizes and forms, exists primarily at core because of the belief that salvation is a desperate need of every single human being in the world. That's why the church is here. The church's mission is to preach, teach and demonstrate and help people practically towards finding salvation in Jesus Christ. So salvation is at the very core of the church's mission and its reason for existence. The second thing to say is that the closest word that's a bit more modern that I can find to sort of translate that word salvation would be rescue. To be saved means to be rescued. In fact, in Hebrew, the name Jesus literally means rescuer. The name Jesus meant deliverer or rescuer. Okay? And as they say, the clue is in the name. So salvation is not just what the church sees as its reason for being, but it is what Jesus said was at the very core of his reason for coming from heaven to earth. He once said, the Son of Man, that was his nickname for himself, the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Okay, he came to seek and to save the lost. Salvation is at the very heart of who Jesus is and why he came. You might then quite wisely ask, well, what is it that we need saving from or rescuing from, if that's what Jesus is all about? What does he come to rescue us from? Many would say, well, I don't need rescuing, thank you very much. I'm just fine, leave me alone. Okay, so that's a fair question. The Bible's quite clear about this, and what it teaches is that we do need rescuing, and that the clue comes in the Christmas story. So when the angel tells Mary that she is to bear a son, the angel says, you are to call him Jesus. And then the angel adds a bit of explanation and says, because he will save his people from their sins. Because he will save his people, rescue his people from their sins. So remember, Jesus means rescuer. And so the angel is explaining what it is that we're being rescued from. And he will save his people from their sins, is what the angel says to Mary. The New Testament teaches, Jesus himself teaches very clearly that sin, that selfishness, that wrongdoing has become a universal sickness of the whole of mankind. We may not all be Hitler, but nevertheless we've all been ensnared and tainted by sin in some way or another. It affects every single one of us. So much so that generally we maybe don't even notice. That's why we might even say, well, I've not got a problem. I don't need Jesus. I don't need rescuing. And I think the thing is that in many cases it's not necessarily outward actions like thieving or murder, but it's also, Jesus says, the attitudes and the thoughts that come from our hearts. Pride and self-righteousness, lust and greed, indifference to God. It's not just necessarily publicly outward actions, but it's also those attitudes of our heart. And because of all that, the Bible says we're trapped and we're lost. Because we've gone our own way, we've left God out, we've lived for number one and put number one first, and we've insisted on doing as we please. And that's what the Bible means when it says that we're lost and we need to be rescued. The other thing Jesus says about sin is that it's like a trap. We're not actually free. We might think we're in control, but little by little that wrong stuff has actually got a control of us, and we're not the people that we could be and that we were meant to be anymore. Sin traps us, and more than that, it corrupts and it stains our soul, and it puts us on the wrong side of God. Salvation, in a nutshell, is simply God's rescue package to all of that problem, and the problem of sin and its bondage and its corruption and its stain. Salvation is God's rescue package. Salvation is freedom, wholeness, cleanness, liberty, a new heart, a new life, forgiveness. It's going from being lost to belonging, from darkness to light, from slavery to liberty, from condemnation to being set free. And it is God's gift, the Bible says, to all who ask. It is very simply God's gift. It's not a self-help package. Salvation is God's gift to any who will come and ask. If you were drowning, what you don't need is swimming lessons. You need salvation. You need a life belt. And the Bible says that Jesus is the only true life belt. And when we're drowning, he doesn't stand on the bank and says, try harder, swim faster. He comes to pull us out. He comes to rescue us. He comes to put his arm around us. He is the deliverer. He is the rescuer from sin and death and selfishness and all of that. He is heaven's life belt, thrown into the river of this world, thrown into this river of sin in which we're all stuck. He is heaven's life belt. And Christianity, very simply, is an invitation simply to get hold of the life belt. Not to swim harder, not to try harder, not to have to impress God, keep a load of rules, just to get hold of the life belt. Say, Jesus, will you pull me out? That's why he's called Jesus. That's why he's called the deliverer, the rescuer, because we need salvation and he came to bring it. See you next time.